Welcome to Left and Right. Well, it's called pot or weed or reefer and has many other names, but here is the bottom line. It is marijuana. For some, great buzz, something to smoke and get high. For others, a gateway to drug abuse. But for many, marijuana is an effective medicine that relieves the pain and side effects of chemotherapy or nuclear drugs that battle the autoimmune diseases. Should we decriminalize or legalize or stay the course? In this edition, we discuss the legalization of marijuana. I'm Michael A. Charbon, and this is Left and Right. Welcome to Left and Right. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Today on Left and Right, we're talking about legalizing marijuana. Legalizing marijuana, did you ever think you were going to talk about that? Well, the elections that just took place in the United States, we saw Seattle, Washington, and Denver, Colorado, in a referendum, voted to decriminalize marijuana. This is our discussion today on Left and Right. Joining me is a political analyst, Mr. Alex Wood. He's going to talk a little bit about his impressions and where America is going and how that may influence us as Canadians. And to my left is Mr. Calvin Barry, former Chief Crown Prosecutor for Ontario, and now runs a very burgeoning legal office as a defense attorney, Calvin Barry. So let's start off, first of all, with the definition. I'm going to go to our lawyer for that. The difference between, Calvin, decriminalization and legalization, for those who want like a definitive definition.
Okay, basically it's under one federal statute, Canada-wide. The states have a different statute per state, and so we have one called the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. It used to be called the Narcotic Control Act, and basically for possession of marijuana, it is illegal. But if you have under an ounce or less, then they have, in the last few years, decriminalized it. What does that mean? Is that if you're charged with a criminal offense, usually you have to get fingerprints and photos, and they're stuck on your record, and they can affect you going across the border. Well, if it's less than an ounce of marijuana or a gram of hash, then what happens is that no fingerprints, no photo. They give you something akin to a speeding ticket, but it's called an appearance notice, and you do have to go to court, but it doesn't have all the same ramifications. In other words, you're not booked, you're not brought in the station, you're not audio videotaped, you don't stay in the station to be processed. They give you a ticket at the side of the road at the Rolling Stones concert, the ACC, you walk away.
Don't besmirch the Rolling Stones, we love it.
Yeah, okay, and you go you go to court, and 90% of the time, if you have no prior record and you haven't been diverted before, diversion means you go side door left and the charge gets withdrawn, so you're completely exonerated. You go to the Salvation Army, get a receipt for $100, give it to the court, and the charge is withdrawn. So that is decriminalization, Michael, versus legalization.
Okay.
It is illegal.
So the premise of the discussion today is twofold. There is a gray area where people say, there's so many people smoking dope now, marijuana is insignificant, and it shouldn't be made such a horrible pain upon society, filling our prisons. I mean, 1.5 million people have gained criminal records because of possession of marijuana. Everybody does it, they should do it. You have another spike that states that marijuana is something that's being used for medicinal purposes. People with chemotherapy. It circumvents the adverse effects of chemotherapy, the sickness, and all the ill feelings. So there are also people who take nuclear drugs for rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases that when they smoke marijuana from a medical standpoint or from a medicinal standpoint, they're able to get their appetite back. They can sleep. They're not smoking marijuana or cannabis to get high. They're doing that to relieve pain or relieve symptoms. There is another contingent, and this is the part that starts to come into discussion when we talk about political analysis from the United States and the actual legal point of view, is that some people state that if you are to legalize marijuana, it is a slippery slope. We begin then to compromise our morals and begin to accept things that actually should never have been brought into our lexicon of even accepting it. So there are some that say, well, if we need it for medical purposes, we should be able to get it. Others say by doing that, it is just plain wrong. And others say that so many people are doing it, what are you making such a big thing about it? Alex Wood, political analyst of the United States political position. what say you as to where things are? I mean, as we saw, Obama came into power again, and through several referendums, you had Washington and Colorado, which are going along the lines of decriminalization and not making it as much of a criminal point as it was previously. I mean, and the one final point is in California, the 3 strikes law. Someone who was charged with 2 criminal offenses, if they're caught with dope, literally a joint or a roach in their ashtray, they could go to jail. So what say you to all this?
Well, first of all, let's make a clear distinction between the election of President Obama and the referendums that took place in Washington and Colorado.
That's why you're a political pundit. Go ahead, Alex.
No, but I mean, these two things are separate. But it's a good point that Calvin brought up, because I think for folks who, particularly in Canada, when you're looking at this issue, it's a state-by-state issue, and so different states. California's been looking at this for a long time, and then we just had what happened, as you mentioned, in Washington and Colorado. And I think that the big thing right now is there's a couple of different aspects to it. There's the medical, as you mentioned. There's also the moral issue that comes up, and then there's a health, and public welfare issue as well. Do these drugs, or does this particular use of this substance contribute in some harmful way to the public health? Does that, eventually become a burden on the society? And with the new healthcare laws coming in, that have come into place in the United States, how does that have an impact? So there's a variety of nuances to the subject matter. The thing that strikes me a lot about this, from this legalization and the recreational use, is where do we stop? Where do we draw the line with it?
An interesting point. We're just going to slip away for a little break, but an interesting fact is it's stated that we could save $150 million in Canada if we legalized marijuana. So we're all talking about budgets. We're talking about moral issues. We're talking about legal issues. We're talking about legalizing marijuana and all the things that come with that, as they say. I'm Michael A. Show. While you're watching Left and Right, we'll be back with more right after this.